Dear friends, we are really very thankful for your presence during this important event for all, despite the pandemic that generates so much suffering in the world, specifically for the most vulnerable children. We are trying to maintain our actions in favor of the dignity and the rights of the child, of the children and the adolescents. Today, the topic is of paramount importance. Education is the key for a future of dignity for children. And the most important aspect is to clearly understand that education is the responsibility of all, of everyone. As the title of this conference indicates, it is the village in all the meanings of this word that educates the child, the family, the community, the congregations such as the LaSalle Brothers, the countries, the responsibility of each government, and international cooperation. We must understand that this priority of the education requires international cooperation on the one hand, and on the other hand, it requires a very concrete adjustment to the needs of each of the children and adolescents, adjustment to the culture, to the language, and the specific situation of each child. And this conference will try to explain, to give some keys, some interpretation keys to be closer to each child and more adjusted to allow the development, the blossoming of each of our children. So I will speak no more, and I give the floor to Brother Nestor, who will explain this a little better than I can. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be in your midst all over the world. Thank you very much. Thank you. We are precisely going to give the floor to Brother Nestor Anaya, the Mission Secretary for the Congregation of the LaSalle Brothers and also Vice President of BICE. Let me remind you, for participants, when we have our speakers, Professor Simeone, and the roundtable with the other interventions, you can write your questions on the chat box. We will look into those and then transmit to our speakers. Thank you. Now I give the floor and many thanks to Brother Nestor. Thank you. Thank you, Alessandra. Good afternoon to all of you. I speak to you from Rome and I hope you are in good health. I am thankful for this opportunity to address you, to introduce our meeting and frame this reflection. An African proverb says, in order to educate a child, you need a whole village. And Nelida Saidiri points out that we not only need a village, we need a good village. It seems obvious that we do need a good village, but it is important to say it since history shows to us that decadent societies have destroyed people, families, even empires. How is a good village? What are its characteristics? We could announce multiple qualities to distinguish a good village. I'd like to point out three that I consider should be included in this mission in this sense. Firstly, respect. Respecting people for the fact they are people. That is very important. Perhaps that is the most important aspect. I respect you not for what you have, for what you've achieved, for what you can do, or because you are older or younger than I am. No, I respect you because you have a value in yourself. I respect you because we are the same, because we have the same origin and same goal. Or is it that we just respect people for their usefulness, for their achievements, or the inheritance they have received, be that financial, physical, or social? In this sense, respecting human rights, and especially the rights of the vulnerable people, is the first step. It is what our human nobility requires of us. Secondly, solidarity. It is not enough to not do bad things. We have to do good deeds. We have to be proactive. We have to help each other. The peasant who was sowing good seeds of excellent quality helped the others when the wind would spread his good seeds. But he did so to benefit, to have a benefit for himself. Let's go farther. It is not just about helping each other because of the usefulness that it represents. To be in solidarity is the path to plenitude. Just as the sun does not give its heat for itself, or just as water does not refresh itself, we too are called to be for the others. Let us be in solidarity to be fulfilled, to be mature, to be in plenitude. Thirdly, comprehension, understanding. By omitting the acts that willfully want to harm, it is necessary to be understanding with the others. Consider that we are fragile, that we are imperfect, and that we can fail. That is the path to learn to understand and forgive, which is necessary to move forward as people, as human groups, be that in the family, with friends, within an organization, or as a society as in general. Therefore, I invite you to take part to a good village which considers the human being with nobility, capable of collaborating for the happiness of others and at the same time being happy as we place ourselves at the service of the others with an understanding attitude. Thank you for being present in this forum. I wish you a day filled with inspiration. Good afternoon. Thank you, Brother Nestor. I now give the floor to Cristina, Professor Cristina Castelli, to present our following speaker. Thank you, Cristina.
Oui. Buongiorno a tutti.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I wish to thank Father Nestor for the suggestions, for the insight that introduced us to this small village that we created today in this virtual village, actually, that we've built together today. I wish to thank Brother Nestor for his insight because it will bring food for thought to our reflection. First of all, I wish to thank Professor Simeone for attending, for being part of this small village today. I think that the the keynote address couldn't be more important than that of Professor Simone. In fact, he's the president of the Faculty of Science, Training Sciences in our of the University of Milan, of the Sacred Heart, and his chair is devoted to a theme that is very dear to Pope Paul VI. That concerns education for the integral human development and also for the development of all people. So his chair is really in line with what we are studying, with the projects that we have developed over the past few years that we will also present today. Professor Simeone also edited the Italian edition of an important UNESCO document titled Rethinking Education. It is a very interesting document by UNESCO, especially for us, and I urge all of you to read it because I'm sure that it has been translated in all the languages. So I think that this document could also help us move forward in our reflections. So once again, thank you, Professor Simeone. You have the floor.
Bene, grazie.
Very well. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I am honored to take part in this meeting organized by BICE, and I wish to thank Professor Olivier Duval, Brother Nestor, Alessandra, who introduced the meeting, the event, and Cristina Castelli, who has so generously introduced me. I'm very happy and very glad to share with you some reflections. Well, first of all, let me begin by picking up a metaphor that has already been shared by Brother Nestor, and also Christina was referring to the theme of the village. If it is true that the African saying goes that it takes a village to raise a child, and a good village, it is equally true that in order to build a good village, we need children. Children are a fundamental resource for the community. I would like to begin my address recalling the invitation that Pope Francis renewed on October the 15th last, an invitation for a common commitment to build global educational compact. And this invitation stems from the awareness, and I quote, that a change must be made to our development model. And we see this clearly, and we have seen it very clearly during the pandemic. In fact, this emergency situation has shown more clearly the need to change our direction, to change our lifestyles. In fact, the health emergency that we are going through has made even more evident the contradictions of the social context in which we live. And it has also made more urgent the need to recover education as an act of hope. It is how Pope Francis called it, an act of hope, one of the most effective ways of humanizing the world and history. And also, he defined it as a natural antidote to the individualist culture. That is why, for this reason, and I quote, never before has there been such a need to join efforts in a broad educational alliance to form mature people capable of overcoming fragmentation and opposition and rebuilding the fabric of relationships for a more fraternal humanity. I think that our rapidly changing world must face major challenges that range from the technological acceleration to climate change, conflicts, migrations, to the phenomena of intolerance and hatred, which could further widen inequalities and which will certainly have a very significant impact even in the decades to come. And also, we are now going through the serious health crisis caused by COVID-19. And this crisis has brought to the surface and it has further aggravated inequalities and the fragilities that afflict our societies. In his encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis urges us all to work together to safeguard our common home. And he also stresses the importance of education as a fundamental tool for understanding the important challenges facing the world today as a whole. However, the educational opportunities continue to be unevenly distributed around the world, despite the efforts of recent decades to reduce the number of children, adolescents, and young people who drop out of school, who do not have the possibility to be educated. Well, this process um, over the past few decades has slowed down significantly. According to recent UNESCO estimates, even before the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, about 17% of children, teenagers, and young people worldwide, most of whom live in the sub Saharan region, were completely excluded from education. And this trend is set to intensify, to grow, also because of the pandemic. In fact, it is estimated that in this region, the sub-Saharan region, the percentage of children who will not have the possibility to go to school will reach 25% by 2030 compared to 12% in 1990. And I'm saying this because I think that it is important to understand this negative trend. And unfortunately, there will be an increase in the number of children who will not be able to receive an appropriate education, but even where accessible, education often remains of poor quality. In poorer countries, 1 in 4 young people cannot read even a single sentence. Moreover, the 2018 PISA data show a slight regression over the past 15 years in basic skills, even in high-income countries where 1 in 5 students is below the minimum standards, the minimum levels. Now, to ensure the quality of education, teachers play a major role. However, it is estimated that many countries in the world face a significant shortage of teachers. In fact, 70% in sub-Saharan countries, for instance, do not have enough teachers. And to reach the ambitious goals of the new international Agenda 2030 for education, it would be necessary to hire 69 million new teachers worldwide. So I think that the formation of teachers, training the teachers is one of the emergencies that we have to address if we want to fight against the exclusion of many children from this educational world. If not promptly addressed, the current crisis risks further perpetuating various forms of inequality. With over 90% of the global student population affected by COVID-19 related school closures, the world is grappling with an unprecedented upheaval in the history of education. Social and digital divides have put the most disadvantaged at risk of learning loss and of dropping out of school. Even a recent study that concerns Italy, that was published by Istat, which is the National Statistical Institute, revealed that over the past few months, the disadvantaged, handicapped children, they were largely excluded from education. 30% of handicapped children, even in Italy, that has a very advanced legislation with regards to school inclusion of handicapped people, could not what these children could not follow classes regularly. And today, more than ever, we have a collective responsibility to support the most vulnerable by helping to reduce the social, cultural, and economic violations that threaten the entire human community. So we need to reverse the trend of stagnating international education aid from official development aid mechanisms that do not reach the most vulnerable countries. International cooperation plays a key role in promoting international solidarity between peoples and in responding to the complex challenges of this so strictly connected world. However, the principles at the basis of international cooperation need to be reviewed in order to bring about a paradigm shift in the way in which the various balances and relationships between the different stakeholders involved are manifested. The various international educational agenda that started to be promoted in 1990 to the present day, for instance, the movement Education for All, or the second goal of the Millennium Development Goals, or for instance, the goals of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, and most especially goal number 4, which is about equality education for all. Well, all of these goals reflect the international community's priorities in the field of education. And these priorities are characterized by a progressive and ambitious expansion of the goals linked to them, which range from literacy to the universal access to primary schooling in developing countries, to quality education and lifelong learning in all the countries of the world. Now, alongside the efforts put in place to achieve these ambitious goals, however, there is the need to redefine not only the levels of education or the rate of schooling in every specific country, but above all, we must redefine the development model that we intend to promote through education. In fact, education plays a key role in the construction of a new model concerns the human being, his or her relationship with the others, relationship with transcendence and nature. So in this sense, international cooperation in the field of education can and must become the opportunity and the necessary space for an exchange, for mutual exchange. so that we can imagine and co-construct alternative scenarios for the development of the individuals and of all the nations. And this development is made all the more urgent because of the speed of the changes that are affecting the societies throughout the world. So from this standpoint, even the world, the Western world, has a lot to learn from the countries that have different cultures and different traditions. We have, in fact, seen that our idea of progress brings often brings it to an unbalance. In fact, the time has come to question ourselves, to redefine together a shared project for the whole of humankind. In his call for the establishment of a global educational alliance, the Pope reminds us that it is necessary to find new ways of perceiving the economy, growth, and progress. However, any change requires that also an educational path be built at the same time. Thanks to this new educational path, we will be able to form people who can live in society and for society and who are willing to serve the community. So it is an education that enables a broader and deeper understanding of reality, something that educates to universal solidarity and to a new humanism. So we are urged to renew our passion for a more open and inclusive education that is capable of patient listening, of constructive dialogue, and of mutual understanding. It is therefore necessary to form mature people capable of overcoming fragmentation and oppositions and of rebuilding the fabric of relationships for a more fraternal humanity. Now, this humanistic vision aims to reaffirm a set of universal ethical principles that should form the basis of an integrated approach to the purposes and the organization of education for all. Such an approach has an impact on the definition of learning processes that promote the acquisition of useful knowledge, and also on the development of competencies at the service of our common humanity. Humanistic view allows the debate on education to be approached going beyond its utilitarian role in economic development. And its central goal should be achieving an inclusive education in which no one is excluded or marginalized. This would also serve as a guide to address the changing landscape of learning worldwide, a landscape in which the role of teachers and other educators continues to be central to foster learning and sustainable development for all. Pope Francis' invitation allows us to start reflecting on the limits of current development models, on the type of society that we wish to build for the future. We need new tools of analysis and social investigation and social analysis that allow the foundation of a pedagogy of international cooperation, a pedagogy that is based on the ethics of responsibility and on the principle of solidarity. To promote paradigm shift in relations between the North and the South of the world, international cooperation must necessarily recognize development as a right, not as an act of generosity, as a social and political dimension of belonging to humanity. This way of understanding international cooperation requires dialogue and trust. These are the building blocks of any genuine partnership in which all the stakeholders can be acknowledged for their potentials and for their capacities. And through these, they agree to contribute to common projects in a framework of equality. So the value of human fraternity, as Pope Francis recalled in his encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti, is an essential guide for rethinking redefining the goals and the mechanisms of current cooperation systems. It is an invitation to reconsider our approach to education in the light of the different cultural traditions in a rapidly changing world, to ensure that everyone, through education, can develop universal values such as respect for life, human dignity, equal rights, social justice, international solidarity in a spirit of shared universal responsibility. So, in this perspective, our university, the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart, promoted the establishment of an observatory on education and international cooperation. Its aim is to foster collaboration between universities, research centers, and international organizations. And I would like to also invite the BSA so that we can start a collaboration to share our interventions, our initiatives, and the observatory will also promote studies, research works, activities, publications on education and international cooperation, because we need to develop a new analysis, new tools of analysis that allow the development of a pedagogy of international cooperation that relies upon responsibility and solidarity. So, in Educational Alliance, the alliance called for by Pope Francis represents, gives us the possibility to put in place a new cooperation model between the countries and the peoples of the world, so that we can initiate those processes of transformation, so that we can build that village of education that I referred to earlier, where in an intergenerational and intercultural encounter, we can educate one another to a new humanism. Thank you for your attention, and I am very happy, I will be very happy to listen to the next speakers. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you also for your invitation to BSA to become part of this prestigious observatory. I know that you were called to direct it. So our congratulations to you. And Professor Castelli is also Vice President of BSA. So I think that we will certainly get in touch with you, and we will try to contribute as best as we can to your important initiative. We have many members of our network who are organizations or congregations, as we will hear during this event, and their task, their goal is also to work in the educational work. Also, thank you for reminding us the values that are recalled by the Pope. Also, you mentioned that the various encyclicals. You also talked to us about the various goals, Agenda 2030. So we really have several disciplines that can help us address all the challenges that you mentioned. We have a question for you in the chat where it is asked, where can we find these global studies on the impact of pandemic on education? Well, if you want, I can give you some indications, and then I'll drop the various links to these studies in the chat box. On the UNESCO website, you can find some pages which are devoted to international studies on the impact that COVID has had on the global community. And then there is also a specific study that concerns Italy, but I will try and look for the specific links, and I will drop them in the chat box. Thank you. I have a question myself, because you mentioned several challenges. You also mentioned that unfortunately data show that there has been a regression while we I mean, all the institutions working in the educational sector tend to progress things, to move things forward. But you highlighted the problem of the difficulty of access to the education, also the lack of teachers, also insufficient funds, especially in public policies. I would like to ask you, do you know whether there are some reflections on because, for instance, our organizations, we are active at the UN, we lobby with governments and with national governments. Could you suggest to us how we could lobby, and how we could actually manage to raise the budgets, to raise the funds, the public funds for the educational sector? Well, I think that there are two major things to do. On the one side, we have there is a cultural and political aspect. So it is necessary to make people understand that education is a resource. It is not an expenditure. It is an investment for the future. So from this standpoint, it is also an element to help the population grow and develop. And to do that, we need to build a new culture, a different culture. We need to raise awareness in the world, to raise awareness on this issue. Let us consider, for instance, what happened with the themes connected to the environment. I recall that these themes at the international level were neglected even 20 or 30 years ago. Nobody talked about environmental protection, whereas today these themes have become top of priority in our agenda. And also enterprises, also firms and companies have started to use these themes for their marketing to have a better credibility with the public, because there is a new social credibility, a new social sensitivity. So these themes have become very appreciated by the public. Well, this is just an example, because I think that the same thing should happen with education. We should develop a social sensitivity that is such to make it advantageous, profitable for organizations and governments to invest in education, because that will respond to a social expectation. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is that we should act or do something about some economic choices. And therefore, for instance, we should praise those governments that invest in education. We should, for instance, develop international mechanisms that allow us to support those governments who have serious projects to improve the educational sector in their country. So, for instance, they prove that they've achieved certain objectives in the educational world. Now, the problem of some very interesting initiatives, such as, for instance, the Agenda 2030 of the UN, is that they risk becoming goodwill declarations, but they do not have any tool to promote these initiatives. They do not have tools, if not those of dissuasion or persuasion. It is too little. We also need to have resources to invest in this field. Thank you very much. I think that this is something that we will talk about, because I am sure that all the countries will be interested to see how we can develop this. I mean, BISE is present in several countries, and I am sure that our members will be very happy to continue the discussion on these themes.
One of the projects of BISE to precisely promote the right to education, beginning by access to education, is within the program of Schools with No Walls that we launched in Guatemala, Paraguay, and Congo and Cambodia. This is a 3-year program that follows up on other projects in this sense as well, with the idea, the objective to facilitate access to education, especially for children and adolescents in situations of vulnerability because of situations of poverty, or because they live far from the school or the city, to act and intervene with the most vulnerable among the vulnerable. This is the objective of this program in within the framework of rights and resilience, creating schools that are protective of the rights of the child, and schools as safe spaces. In this sense, I'm very happy to introduce Julia Cardoso. Julia is the coordinator of the program Schools with No Walls in Paraguay and Alto Paraná, and through the organization Calle Escuela, a member of the BICE network since many years ago, with projects in Asunción but also in this area. Julia will present her work, her activities that within this program are being implemented by BICE and Calle Escuela. So, Julia, you have the floor, and thank you for being with all of us. To all, it is a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to listen to the people that preceded me, and thank you. As as Alessandra said, I'm a member of the council in Calle Escuela. I'm from Paraguay. I live in Alto Paraná, which is one of the most affected areas by the pandemic. In this process, I want to transmit my experience and present part of the work of Calle Escuela in Alto Paraná and the schools with no walls. First of all, I wanted to present briefly the mission of Calle Escuela. It's about promoting an improvement in the quality of life of all children and adolescents, especially those children and teenagers who are workers. And in our country, we have them because of the situation of poverty. Many children go out to work, be that in their neighborhood or outside in the community, in the markets. And these are places where Calle Escuela is present and supporting them, so that the children are not exploited, and so their rights are observed. The mission of Calle Escuela is to have a main character participation and to promote the strict respect of human rights. As Calle Escuela, we also have an educational proposal with some axes that I will mention. I will present each of them because I will rather focus on the work we carry out in Paraná. For us as an institution, the children are the center, they're the main focus, they are the social subject of right. In this process, we work on the issue of identity, the identity of the child, of the worker, the identity based on culture, based on the area where they live, whether urban, rural, the indigenous children, based on the essence of the children who go to work for various reasons. Another pillar that we work on is the formation training. Children should have access to information mainly, and the formation process of the child has to emerge from the needs. We have to build that process, that formation and training process together. Then we very we've strongly developed the organizational processes with the children in Calle Escuela. The organization as a space for resilience, as a strategy, so that the children can move ahead, so that they are not alone, so that they do not need to make it alone, rather together and organize. It's like a democratic space that needs to be participative. Resilience as the capability that is generated in the child to move forward despite the situation, accompanied by educators, adults, family, the community. The work is based a lot on the family and the community. What we seek through all of this is a social change. We want to think about this social change, change the reality, and generate in them and in the family an awareness, as well as in the community. The child in the community is the responsibility of all of us. He is a community responsibility, so it's not just the responsibility of the mother and father, but also of the community. Where do we work? This is a map of Paraguay. As Alessandra said, Calle Escuela works in Asunción, that is the capital city. Asunción has the central office, but we're also in the area of Alto Paraná, where we developed the project of schools with no walls. Alto Paraná is located at the frontier, at the border, the triple border with Brazil and Argentina. Ciudad del Este is where we are working in Calle Escuela, and it is located at the border with Brazil. It is an area, a commercial area. It is merely commercial, and that is where they all come from everywhere, from Argentina, from Brazil, to buy the computer products. So with this pandemic, Alto Paraná, Ciudad del Este, this whole area was affected very much, because the bridge that that connects the country to Brazil was closed for 6 months, beginning in March, and it was reopened in October. So that was a very hard blow to the economy and the families who work and depended on the sales at the center, or the people who cross the border, where when they go work to the other side. Many families we work with are domestic employees on the Brazilian side, or they purchase vegetables because it is cheaper, and then come to sell their products on the Paraguayan side. So that's why we were very strongly affected by this, by the closing of borders and by COVID. Here, I just want to present in general terms the Calle Escuela programs. It is the project Schools with No Walls. Our subject, our population of working children at this school is the early childhood from 2 to 5 years old, and also the population of children who attend school, that is from the age of 6 to 18. Our area of work is the community and the family. Both the family and the community are responsible for the children. So our general objective is to contribute to the enforcement of the right to education, and to favor the the participation of children and adolescents, vulnerable children and adolescents to citizenship. Our strategy, we work in direct care in community spaces where children come to carry out their activities, that is early childhood work with a teacher, and also and we also provide school support. So these are community spaces. What we also seek is to mobilize adults for the sake of the rights of the children. We also seek to develop parental practices based on a culture of right, promoting the good treatment. One of our learnings, these practices to promote a different treatment of the children, allow them to participate, listen to them, and to treat them in situations of physical or psychological violence that still, where we still believe that by pulling their hair or pulling their ears or perhaps hitting a child is a way to correct them. So what we try is to remove those habits and to modify this treatment, and to also allow for in a comprehensive attention of children, develop the aptitudes, the skills, try to ensure that children can gain access to the formal educational system. There's a very large gap in the children who drop out of school. In our country, we also have a law that states that education should be for free, but it is not. Even if it's public, it is not for free. There are costs, and sometimes this the situation of poverty sometimes leads to the fact that the children cannot support themselves and they drop out. So what we seek to achieve is to also maintain the children within the formal education system. We also promote the intergenerational participation, that is the work with the community, the mothers, and especially the young people in the community.
Nosotros veníamos ya trabajando desde varios años y bueno, este
For
año
several years, we've been working with the children in a participative process to build the space where the children will be during the year. The early childhood centers are prepared, decorated, and developed with the community, with the children in a participative process. So, what happened to us? In January, once the pandemic broke out, it was forbidden to leave our houses. And the school activities were also prohibited. So the motto was stay at home. And that was one day before the activities were to begin, where the children were ready to begin their early childhood activities, to go to the community centers, which they had built and prepared. So this caught us by surprise as everybody else, and it led us to rethink and restructure ourselves as educators to see how we could respond to the demands of children
el tema de que un niño que ya no podía ir al
who,
centro
who could
comunitario,
not
que los educadores que por ahí
who
estábamos
could not
debíamos
understand. I
acompañarlos y
mean,
guiarlos,
a
ya no
child
podíamos
who could
recurrir a la
not
comunidad
attend to
y que si llegábamos a
the
llegar
community
a
center,
dar
the
alguna
educators could not
respuesta,
go visit the
podíamos hacer
community.
en
And if we
respectivas
did go
palabras,
to the
buscaremos
community, we
la
could
cuestión
not
del
do as
apoyo,
we
los
usually did, that
abrazos,
is,
los
hugs.
saludos,
Here we're very warm. We hug the
eh,
children. We greet in our
con
culture.
hierba, con
We
agua, qué sé
drink
yo. En
this
el invierno toma
sort
mucho
of
el calor,
tea that we
entonces
drink a
cómo
lot
hacer
during the
entender
summer.
a
So
la
how could
familia
we
que uno va a la
make the
comunidad
family understand that
esas
if you
cosas no las podía
visited the
hacer.
community, we could no longer do those
Fue un
things?
proceso bastante difícil
It was
y
a
fue un
quite
proceso
difficult
de
process,
reconstrucción,
and it was a process
de
of
reorganización,
reconstruction,
reestructuración
of
de nosotros.
reorganization and
Primero
restructuring
como
of
educadores,
ourselves. Firstly, as
estar preparados
educators,
de cómo responder,
to be
porque
prepared
no es
to
lo mismo
respond. This was
y
something that
con
was
los
very
docentes,
new,
con los
and
auxiliares,
also with the
antes de
faculty, the
trabajar con
teachers
los niños.
who work in the classrooms with the
Tuvimos que
children.
repensar
So we
y
had to
rearmarnos
rethink and
y
rebuild our strategy and our community
sin
action
abandonar a los
without
niños porque
abandoning the
era el
children,
momento donde más necesitaban
because that
el
was
acompañamiento
when they
y
mostly
nosotros nos
needed the
sentíamos
accompaniment. And we
encerrados en nuestras
felt
casas,
locked
nosotros por
up
una ley
in
teníamos
our
que
homes
encerrarnos
by a law
y
that
ya sea
demanded us to
encerrados
be
y toda la
locked up
familia y vos te quedás en tu casa.
and go out only
Ese
to go
proceso
to the
muy
supermarket or pharmacy.
fuerte
That was a process that was very
y
difficult
al
for all of
final
us.
peor aún,
And it was
porque por
even
ahí
worse for the
nosotros
children
ayudábamos a entender
because
y
perhaps we
gestionar la situación,
understood
pero
the
cómo hacerle
situation.
entender al niño
But how
que
can you
ya estaba
explain
esperando ir a
to
jugar, que ya estaba esperando su merienda, que ya
the
estaba
child
esperando
that was looking forward
que ya
to playing, having
y
their
empezamos a
snacks, and
repensarnos,
doing their
reestructuramos
activities?
y empezamos a
So we
pensar en un
restructured
programa
ourselves and we started
en
to
llegar a los niños y las niñas de
think
manera
of a
diferente,
program to
tomando
reach
en
the
cuenta que
children in a
cada
different
escuela
manner,
estaba
taking
llegando a los
into
niños
account that
a niños y niñas con un programa, con un
the
nuevo programa que se
school was
llamaba
being
Escuela
offered with a
Clases
new program
Virtuales
called
con los
School at
niños en la
Home,
casa.
virtual classes
Y
with
este
children
programa
at
generó
home.
un impacto muy
And that
fuerte porque los niños
generated a
dejaron de
strong
socializar,
impact
no
because a
podían
child
salir de su
stopped
casa,
socializing.
no
The
podían
child
ir a
could
ver a
not
sus
leave
amigos, sus compañeros.
his home, relate to
Eso también generó
friends.
un pesar y un daño muy fuerte.
So
A
the
partir de ahí
damage
nosotros
was
pensamos
great.
en trabajar con los niños en primera
We
infancia
thought about
y
working
lo
with
hicimos
early
iniciando
childhood with
llegando
this
a las
program
escuelas
at
pero
home,
con el
going
tema de
to
estar
their
con los niños y
homes,
las niñas, pero
going
también
to the
de
children's
forma
homes,
virtual,
but also in a virtual
no
manner,
una persona extraña, que es lo que pasaba
but
con el
not a
ministerio.
stranger, which
Hacíamos
is what
videos
the
y esos videos
ministry
estaban por
did.
las
They
nubes
produced
y
videos and
el niño y la niña
broadcasted the
no
videos
podía
to
conectarse, entonces
throughout the
no hablaba
country.
su
So the
idioma,
child did
no,
not know the
no
teachers,
disfrutaba de
the
la vida
teachers did
a
not
veces
speak their
tenía
language or did not
muchos
provide the
rechazos.
usual explanations. So
Entonces
that was
ya
rejected. So we had to
quieren hacer un trabajo a partir de un
think
video que las profesoras le envían
about a program
a cada
to
familia, a cada mamá,
encourage them to produce
y ahí
a
logramos hacer la
video
réplica
that
de lo que
teachers
la
would
docente
send
se
to the
quería
mothers. So
preparar
that's
y esa
where,
preparación
when we
hecha
managed to
realidad los
do this
videos con
in-home
profesores, con
program, so we
profesores
started
luego, y
preparing our
logramos hacerlo
program,
en casa
and we
y
managed
instalarlo
doing
en las
this
escuelas. Y al instalarlo en las
in-house
escuelas,
program, and we
vimos
installed it at
de
the
cómo
homes, and
las
we also
madres
realized
estaban
how
sumamente involucradas
the mothers
en
were
ese
very much
proceso de
involved
educación de sus
in
hijos,
this
porque para poder llegar a
process
los
of
niños,
educating their
al menos
children.
primero nosotras educadoras teníamos que llegar a las mamás o
First
al
of all,
entorno familiar más
the
cercano,
educators had to
que
reach the
desde ahí
mothers
tenía que trabajar
or
con ellos.
the
Entonces fue una
close
experiencia rica porque tuvimos que
environment of the
capacitarnos primero
children. So
nosotros
it was an
mismos
enriching
con
experience.
los
We had to
docentes
train
y también
ourselves, and then we had to train the
nosotros
mothers by
dando
telephone, explaining
acompañamiento,
how the
trabajando los
homework was to be
videos
done with their children,
y
giving them the
ellos
tools, sending them
trabajaban
a
con sus
video, and then they would
eso
work
fue
with their
muy
children.
útil
That was very
porque
good
se notó,
because we
se
noticed
notó cómo la familia
how
estaba involucrada en el proceso y
the
cómo
family was involved in
lo
the
hacíamos con los
development process of their children, because usually in schools we are told that the families do not support their children and the children are left alone. But it can be done, and we have managed to accompany through different learnings. Some things were successful, other things would be corrected. We would correct mistakes. And I think that by video number 20, we managed to understand how the video was to be produced to adequately reach the children. So we had that experience. We entered their homes and we managed to have the family involved, and the family understood, because it used to be just going to the community center to play. So yes, they draw and they play, but the parents did not understand the importance of stimulating children during early childhood. As they had to work with their children, they managed to understand how important it was for the children to participate to these programs. It was therefore very, very productive, as was the community participation, because in the event one mother had no cell phone, another mother who owned a cell phone would invite the child to the neighbor's home so the child could actually do his homework with a little friend. So the process also included some socialization, which is very concerning in the children, since the pandemic had interrupted the socialization among children. We This was a much more difficult stage. The pandemic struck very hard the little ones, but also the older ones, because they had to work from their phone. They had to copy, the 5 pages or 10 pages that a known professor provides. Not understanding copying and doing the homework was very difficult for them. Doing a homework in something that was not understood, that generated many difficulties and anxiety in children, because of the impossibility to do their homework. And we could not explain, because they could not understand classes, virtual classes. We There was a rejection. They no longer wanted to look at the telephone. There was a very strong rejection. And we realized how the educational system started leaving out the children who had no tools, those who had no telephones or other. So they were losing their year for lack of equipment, of devices, or the appropriate conditions to gain access to virtual classes. Some families lost their jobs and they had to go to the street to work. There were safety issues also, and they wouldn't leave their children at home, so they ended up taking their children to work with them. So that's the process that led to schools with no walls, accompaniment by professors so that the children would do their homework. And the teachers were trying to make children understand their work and to help them take online classes. We even acquired a copy machine because we would make 1,000 copies per week. Professors would send the work to the mother's phone by PDF, sending them 10 pages, and the child had to do these 10 pages copied on his notebook or do their homework or print if they could. The people who the people could spend should had to spend like €1 a day to pay for the copies, for the photocopies, in situations where the family perhaps earned €2 per day. So they ended up sometimes not doing their homework because of the financial situation. It is a situation of poverty. And when the situation opened up again, they started working again. Some people were working as a secret, so without the police noticing. Anyhow, we managed to integrate the children again. Here we're talking about the intergenerational aspect and the solidarity of poor families. In the situation of poverty, the people were concerned about the children and the families who had no food. That was something very striking in Paraguay historically. The popular organizations organized soup kitchens once a week after the pandemic, after the first month when people were hungry. Sometimes they would just eat uh, something based on herbs and sugar with no milk. When we started talking about all this situation in the communities, the poorest communities began this process called the community kitchens. They started to ask for support, they asked for help, and the neighbors who had a little more would help and cook on the street, usually on a street or in a yard, and they cooked for those who had nothing. So the family would come with a pot and pick up food to bring it back home. This process developed. We received help, and that applied pressure on the government. In the case of Alto Paraná, since we are at the border, economically, the government had to provide support for these community soup kitchens. And there were people who volunteered to cook 2 or 3 times a week to feed 200, 300, or even 400 families who just had lunch with those soup kitchens. And when the soup kitchens were not available, they just ate whatever they could. Julia, please, we're running out of time. Took advantage of this participation. So the learnings for us, what was very important is that we reinvented ourselves as educators. We saw the solidarity. We rediscovered that the son, the child of other families in my community is also my responsibility. There was a commitment on the part of the community for the children. That was a very important learning. One concern, a reflection that we took home and that remains and worries us is the next step, because right now we have high numbers in COVID cases. Hospitals are running out of spaces. So we are concerned about what will happen in the future. What's going to happen to the child who was locked up in early childhood. Some could attend the classrooms. Other children will return to school without a process of socialization. We are concerned about the children in school age. We fear that we will go to the following year without learning too much, with no school support or other activities. So there's a fear of having lost a year and to be promoted to the following year without having learned anything. And the other issue is the support for solidarity. We've seen this with the mothers and the generation. Thank you, Julia. Sorry that I need to interrupt you, but we are really running out of time. I think that all the other participants could value the work that Calle Escuela is doing in the area of Alto Paraná. We also have the slides available for everyone. So thank you very much. Angela, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alessandra. With us the brilliant work Calle Escuela does every day in Paraguay, despite the challenges. Now for our next intervention, we move from Asunción to Australia, where it's late at night while we're speaking. So this is why we have a video. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce Tracy Adams, the CEO of Your Town, who gives us an overview of the comprehensive services that Your Town has been offering for decades now to children and youth at risk, responding to over 8 million contacts. And I want to briefly recall the words of Professor Simeone on the Global Compact on Education, who said that today, more than ever, we have a collective responsibility to support the most vulnerable people by helping to reduce the social, cultural, and economic violations that threaten the human community. And he reminded us also that Pope Francis invites all the educational community to renew our passion for a more open and inclusive education, capable of patient listening, constructive dialogue, and mutual understanding. And we will see in a minute that Your Town is an effective and passionate response to this call, adjusting services to match the evolving needs of young people and introducing actions to reach out to new vulnerabilities. In fact, the tremendous impact of Your Town has continued also during the pandemic, thanks to the vision, to the proactivity, and to the deep commitment of its team of professionals and of volunteers to transform young lives and to strengthen communities. I leave you with the video. Thank you.
At Your Town, we really are committed to being a living example of the Lassallean charism in word and in deed. Of recent years, one of the big things we've done to promote that inclusivity is actually go through a name change. So some of you may recall We used to be called Boys Town, very gender specific, but that's where we started from. And one of the reasons we moved to Be Your Town was to really showcase that our services are for all children and young people. And in fact, the majority of those who use our services today are actually girls and young women. I'm going to take the opportunity to share with you what some of those services look like, how they've evolved, and what we continue to be focused on as we need to keep adjusting the way we deliver services to best meet the needs of children and young people, keeping them at the forefront of everything we do, respecting their voices, respecting their needs, and representing them in the ways that we believe is important. One of the big things as an organisation that's been highlighted during the pandemic is the role that digital and online services have provided. And of course, we've operated Kids Helpline here in Australia for almost 30 years, so we were well versed to take the opportunity to best meet the need of young people during the 2020 year that has been. We continue to offer telephone counselling support, web chat support, email, and introduce this year a new platform called My Circle, a peer-to-peer ability to come together, moderated by one of our counsellors, where young people can support each other, share their own experiences, and use the counsellor to continue to build content, capacity, and allow these young people to know that they're not alone, particularly when it comes to managing their mental health and well-being. Tens of thousands of young people use Kids Helpline every year. Mental health is our number one issue. Anxiety, depression, and emotional well-being. Of course, we also deal with very serious issues. Child protection, thoughts of suicide, family violence. They are all make up what has become a very critical service in the landscape of caring for children and young people in Australia. 75% of the users of Kids Helpline are young women and girls. They are the most likely to seek help. Certainly showcases for us that there's much more that we need to do to promote help seeking and well-being amongst young men. Young women are very well equipped, from what we can see, to actually give voice to their needs and demonstrate where they go to seek help. We've also seen that in the way that we've adjusted our refuges and our family programs. We've long operated San Miguel, a very large residential service that originally supported homeless families. We made a deliberate decision to change that, not because homeless families aren't still critical and in critical need, but we really wanted to focus on young parents and their children. Child protection issues start at very young ages, and for many of our young parents, they're 16, 17, 18, they've grown up in the child protection system. We wanted to ensure that we could support them be the very best parents that they can be to their children, so that their children have the opportunities of education that so many of these young parents did not. And these young families will live at our San Miguel service for up to a year while we continue to support them, their children, their babies, allowing those children to have the best start in life. We also have a family and domestic violence service that has continued to evolve and change. Many of the families who now live in our refuge there are actually migrants to Australia, have come from countries where they've escaped so much violence as those communities, and yet still come and live here in a country where they should be safe, but they're not. That service today continues to offer counselling, a home, safety, but it also includes child protection, expressive therapy, allowing the children to be able to share what their life has been like, to help them heal in safety. And the families will live there for a period of 3 to 6 months. Employment continues to be a big focus for us. In 2020, so many young people lost their jobs here in Australia because tourism shut down and continues to be shut down, and many of the young people have their entry point jobs in those spaces. So we're working with them to support their skills and to also support the non-vocational things, their mental health and well-being, their education, how to get a driver's licence, all things that are so critical to young people to be able to be equipped to take jobs when they're ready, and to also allow them to continue to feel valued to grow. Another key element of our work continues to be in child protection, and we're really just kicking off a new research project here that's going to continue to inform our child protection strategies. Child exploitation, child sexual abuse continues to be at high numbers here in Australia, particularly in community and family environments. And we know that young girls and young women are particularly vulnerable in these spaces. With support from corporates, we're going to be really equipping ourselves to strengthen our own capacity to meet their needs, to create a circle of practice with other providers where we're constantly applying new knowledge that we learn from these young people that we have the privilege of working with. That's a key focus for us at Your Town, not only providing the service, but giving voice to these young people and using their voices to continue to seek change in the environment that we operate in. We're really proud to have introduced youth participation groups, young people with a lived experience of a suicide attempt, young people from the LGBTQI+ group who share with us their life experiences, and young Indigenous children who share with us what their needs are. They are allowing us to continue to grow, to change, to evolve and to strengthen. And for us, we maintain that as part of being something that is Lasallian. Thank you.
If it wasn't for Kids Helpline, I wouldn't be here today. It's as simple as that.
This is Molly. She lives at home and has suffered with mental illness since the age of 13.
For us as a family, Kids Helpline has meant that we still have our daughter with us. Kids Helpline has saved Molly's life.
Molly is the youngest of 4 children. She has 3 older brothers. After 3 boys, I had my beautiful girl. Molly's been suffering severely with mental illness for many, many years. Much longer, I think, than we ever realised.
It's the unseen enemy. It's you don't know, and you see her today. She's perfectly normal. They can't see the illness, but she has an illness, and she has a very severe illness. We see that often, and it's been hard. It's been hard.
For young people like Molly, suicide is now the leading cause of death for their age group.
I first heard about Kids Helpline when I was about 12 or 13. My school counsellor actually gave me a little Kids Helpline card, but I didn't call them until about a year later when I was going through a really, really bad time, and I found the website online. I was calling because I was feeling extremely suicidal and I wanted to make an attempt on my life. I was under a lot of pressure. I didn't have many friends at school. Around the same time, my mum had been getting sick. I didn't want to talk to my friends. I didn't want to see my family. I just didn't want to exist. And so they managed to calm me down and talk me through things and help me see a different way of looking at things. There are times I know I wouldn't have made it through to the next morning if I hadn't been able to call Kids Helpline. Like, they helped me understand what I was feeling and why, and it didn't make me feel like I was a burden or crazy or anything like that. I just felt understood.
It saved her life. There's absolutely no doubt about it. If Kids Helpline hadn't been there, she wouldn't be here today. One phone call, one counsellor saved her life.
Every day I work really hard on my mental health and keeping myself healthy and happy. I have lots of things, support networks around me now. I'm in therapy. I have fantastic family and friends. Kids Helpline is definitely still a support for me.
It's not as simple as a broken arm that fixes itself in 6 weeks. This is something that she will live with and that we will live with for the rest of our lives.
No, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter where you come from, what socioeconomic level you come from, what background you come from, what ethnic race group you come from, what religious background, anything at all. It doesn't discriminate.
We made a decision that we would try and give back to Kids Helpline. It's been so important for us.
I've recently started doing some volunteer work with Kids Helpline to help them have more of a youth-driven approach and understanding of how they can help young people and what else they can do to make the service better.
For Sue and John, they are just thankful for every day they have their daughter.
Molly's still with us, and for that I'm so grateful. But every day is a struggle for her. It's comforting to know that there is a service such as Kids Helpline that she can still contact and that can help her through those really dark moments.
Molly, my beautiful girl, suffers tremendously from mental illness. A very brave, courageous soul. and she's getting through life thanks to Kids Helpline, and that's where funding is so vital.
Of introducing the following two presentations inspired by the program Tutors of Resilience of BC in collaboration with the unit on resilience of the Catholic University of Milan that I belong to. This program, Tutors of Resilience, allows social operators, educators, psychologists, and social workers to enrich their professional skills and promote processes of resilience in the children and adolescents who live in the situations of vulnerability because they're victims of abuse, because they were displaced from their homes due to violence and armed conflicts. Currently, this program, thanks to this program, more than 40,000 children have benefited and 700 workers throughout the 4 continents in 10 countries. The voices we'll hear speak of good practices and resilience in their contexts. They are a result of educators, psychologists, animators who look at the future with hope without losing their contact with reality, working side by side with other social workers and actors and the same communities, generating spaces for participation so that the children and adolescents can feel as actors and protagonists in their lives, recognizing them as effective subjects of right and not objects of protection or the property of others. I have the honor of introducing Catherine Reyes, educator of the NGO of Guatemala, that is part of the Central Table of BICE. We started working in 2017 about this program, and in 2019 we adjusted the resilience manual to the Central American context for Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. It was a wonderful task, but I do not want to reveal more details. So, Catherine, you have the floor. It is an honor to be here talking about this task. As you say, we've been doing this for years with the support of BICE. As I said, it is a process that became a reality 2 years ago. There were several aspects, and one of them was to rely on the expert on resilience who came to Guatemala to work with us in the context of this manual that exists in English, French, and Spanish, contextualized in Central America, and in the future it'll also be adapted to Africa. Among the participants that could make this process a reality, we have church institutions and civil society institutions, also the University of Rafaela here in Guatemala, ecclesial communities, the Marist Brothers, and many more who made this process a reality, which was achieved with the support of BICE, of course, coordinated by the Association Francisca del Monde and the Catholic University of Milan. I'm going to talk about the general changes in this manual. First of all, there's a more inclusive language. When we speak of an inclusive language, we refer to being able to mention girls, boys, and adolescents, and not just children. The change in the term minors, childhood or adolescent, minor is a term that is no longer used, and also the opportunity to add examples of national stories from Central America and South America. The contextualization of this manual for Central America and even South America comes from a Latin American overview, a more participative focus on the rights of the childhood. Another change was to transform the concept of tutor as a resilience facilitator. For us, it is more enriching because here the term tutor can convey the idea of more vertical relations. What we look for is the country. We want to transmit the idea that the relations with the children and adolescents are horizontal. I will now speak of the more specific changes for each of these modules. The module number one deals with resilience, its main characteristics, the concepts, and the pedagogical concepts. This module does not present major modifications. The only modifications that are visible are the addition of Central American and South American examples of children and adolescents who see and experience resilience. Module 3, the one to facilitate the construction processes and launch resilience, and the model of the house, the little house, that I think has been conveyed by BISA since the 80s as a pioneer. Some advantages in this module. The only thing that changed was to specify that the risk and protection factors can also be called resilience factors and not resilience, so that it is simpler to understand the factors of protection and those of risk. Module 4, it is the module of the tutor. As I said, there's a major change, which we call the facilitator, not the tutor. Another important change was that there was an added objective, a main objective, that is to create spaces for the participation of children and adolescents so they can recognize themselves as subjects of right and not objects of property. And this each theme was related to an article of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, so that the manual could focus on the rights of the child and the adolescents. In module 6, there were major changes, since this module deals with the traces of resilience, experiences, and testimonies of different actors when it comes to resilience. We dealt with themes such as disability, family abuse, migration, natural disasters, and we made the changes referred to issues that are lived up close and on a daily basis. We're not saying whether they are more or less important. They are realities that are completely different, just as a sexual abuse, family violence, exclusion, discrimination, migration, that is shared in two versions, trafficking and violence. When we speak of violence by organized crime, we refer to the adolescents who are involved into gangs and criminal organizations, and who are therefore seen as causing victims when in fact they were the victims. In response to COVID, we achieved different actions. As all the different institutions in the world, we had to adjust to do new projects at the time of pandemic. Initially, humanitarian help. More than 3,500 families benefited from this humanitarian help to cover for their basic needs and nourishment needs, as Julia said. In our reality of extreme poverty, the pandemic sharpened these issues. We collaborated with the University of Rafael and Landivar, and we achieved several projects, and with the support of a psychological help. There were two stages of these workshops. The general themes that were addressed were how to perform a diagnosis with the faculty and community and religious leaders. Those are the agents in direct communication with children and adolescents, and they offered the themes that could be interesting for them before the pandemic. Among these, we have stress management, coordinating confined students' activities within the family, care of mental health, management of anxiety in children and adolescents. These are general themes, but during these two stages in June and September, we focused on working on resilience so that we could concretely apply the work done with the manual. Firstly, we achieved the training of educators, but we also trained in the theme of this manual with parents and carers. In September, the same two trainings were held and they addressed the carers and parents as well as educators and professionals. The idea was to transmit and model the different activities. She's breaking up. After the theory, we went into practice. Here, we also introduced activities that promoted the knowledge of the rights of the child and adolescents, and the activities that help educators promote resilience. Among these activities, she's breaking up. The general objective is to identify the family resources by degrees so that these resources could help in this during the lockdown and the pandemic. Also, the family flag, whose objective is to value and reflect on the importance of the family identity since we were all locked down. And suddenly, she's breaking up. She's breaking up. With their rights and of course the issue of emotions. The objective of this objective is to give a sense of the activities and negative and positive activities in life, and this was appropriate because of the lockdown. These are just some of the activities that were shaped so that these community and religious leaders could go work with the families. Among our challenges, the management of technology by participants. 80% of the participants were in the urban area and 20% in the rural area. This shows that this is a major challenge for our educators and leaders to access internet for financial reasons and also due to location. Also participation in the rural areas and transferring activities to this virtual modality. This also represented a challenge because there was material and physical contact, but we worked at making these adjustments to shape all of them in the best possible way. I want to conclude with this sentence by Monsignor Girardi, who says that there may be no clearer indicators than those referred to childhood. They show the health and illness of a people. They maintain the balance in a society. I want to thank Bise and Alessandra for this reality and for being able to rely on this resource. Happy to recall that beautiful experience and to adjust it and to the times of today. With this, I now invite you to go from Guatemala to Mozambique. It is the turn of Brother Sebastião Lopez. He's an educator and psychologist. Last year, I was lucky to travel to attend the first formation in Tutors of Resilience, and I met Sebastião and his wonderful community of educators. Our work since then has not stopped, even during the pandemic. A couple of days ago, we completed a second online training with operators in Mozambique. So it's a pleasure to have Friar Bastião here, and this time he'll speak about resilience and hope in a time of crisis, two necessary aspects. I think it's a video.
Sou Sebastião Lopes Pereira, sou brasileiro, vivo em Moçambique há 3 anos, na cidade da Beira, onde, enquanto irmão laçalista, enquanto comunidade laçalista, temos um centro assistencial que atende em torno de 450 crianças, temos uma escola comunitária em parceria com a Diocese da Beira, aqui em Moçambique, que atendemos em torno de 3.500 estudantes, e temos também o Colégio La Salle Beira, um colégio da nossa missão, que também estamos inseridos dentro de uma promoção de uma educação humana e cristã. Lembrar que essa educação ela se insere em meios de pessoas de diferentes crenças, diferentes religiões, diferentes questões étnicas, cristãos católicos, cristãos neopentecostais, mas independente, nos inserimos e estamos proporcionando uma educação humana, essa educação onde olha o aluno como centro, onde proporciona uma educação voltada para a fraternidade, para a esperança, uma educação de qualidade. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, partilho também um pouco dessa experiência cá em Moçambique, a partir de uma missão presente há mais de 25 anos, que em 2019 fomos desafiados a nos reinventarmos. Fala-se hoje de crises, com a pandemia, que assola não somente Moçambique, mas todos os países do mundo. Falar também da pandemia e falar de uma crise nos leva aqui em Moçambique a falar de 2019 e partilhar uma experiência educativa onde tivemos que ser resilientes, tivemos que nos superarmos, tivemos que ser criativos para dar uma resposta a quê? Em 2019, precisamente no dia 14 de março, passou na cidade da Beira um ciclone que deixou quase 85% da cidade destruída, quase um mês sem energia, sem água potável, onde muitas pessoas perderam suas casas, onde nós também fomos afetados. Nossos centros educativos foram destruídos, tiveram suas coberturas arrancadas. E o que fazer? Como nós agimos? Como nós construímos? Como fomos um sinal e uma presença em meio a tantas dificuldades? Primeiro, a unidade, o ouvir, o estar presente e ser presença significativa com aqueles que nos foram confiados. Bom, posso dizer que não foi fácil, dizer também que hoje não está sendo fácil, porque temos que nos reinventarmos. Mas lá naquele ano, a partir de muita conversa, de muita unidade, a partir também depois que as coisas foram se normalizando com a ajuda externa, pudemos e nos reestruturamos. Mas a estrutura, acredito que não foi tanta dificuldade, não tivemos tanta dificuldade, porque olhar no processo educativo, após um evento traumático, tivemos que reunir nossos educadores, tivemos que conversar, criar estratégias de ação. Então, ouvir a unidade para um objetivo maior, que era acolher nossos alunos, porque percebemos que as crianças estavam na rua, as crianças estavam sem um ambiente educativo, e aqui a escola, o ambiente educativo é muito importante, porque mesmo com pouco tempo que elas passam na escola, já faz muita diferença. A escola é um sinal de esperança, o ambiente educativo é um sinal, é um espaço onde podemos proporcionar sonhos, proporcionar, olhar para um futuro diferente. E aqui em nossas obras educativas não foi diferente em 2019. como também agora no presente, diante de uma pandemia, onde temos que nos reinventarmos. Falar da parceria que tivemos com a BICE foi muito importante dentro do curso de resiliência, onde podemos avaliar, pensar e reestruturar nossa missão. Porque com os professores, na formação dos professores e sendo lideranças positivas junto aos nossos estudantes, junto à comunidade educativa, podemos superar esses desafios. E já em 2020, com a pandemia, com a nova crise, estamos sempre nos avaliando, sempre procurando estratégias de ação. Bom, não foi diferente porque lá em 2019 tivemos que conversar, tivemos que sentar. Aqui na cultura africana, aqui em Moçambique também não é diferente, é comum as pessoas sentarem debaixo de uma árvore para poder resolver seus problemas, poder resolver suas dificuldades. Então esse processo de enculturação, esse processo de escuta para resolver um problema, uma dificuldade, foi muito importante e atualmente também é muito importante para que também possamos superar esses desafios. Desafios que são constantes. Podemos falar da pandemia, da Covid-19, mas também falamos da pandemia da fome, da falta de escola, da falta de trabalho, da falta de esperança, da falta de oportunidade para as mulheres. Então nós temos com nossos colaboradores em nossas missões, em nossos centros educativos, com nossos professores, essa formação onde o despertar da liderança faz nos unirmos mais ainda para superar cada evento, cada dificuldade. Acredito que não é fácil para ninguém, mas com a proposta onde a unidade, ou a presença significativa do professor na sala de aula, com uma palavra que estimula o aluno a não desistir, a presença de nós educadores enquanto lideranças superiores, enquanto irmãos, é muito importante no processo de motivação, no processo também de plantar a semente, né, dentro de uma comunidade, plantar a semente da esperança. Essa semente que tem que ser regada, essa semente que tem que ser plantada. Os frutos, acredito que serão muitos, porque como professores, como educadores, plantar a semente da esperança no coração de cada criança. E aqui em Moçambique, nós percebemos no olhar, no carinho, no afeto, que essa semente, bons frutos darão, porque acreditamos que grandes coisas são possíveis.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias a nuestros
Thank you very much to our speakers, Brother Sebastião, Tracy, Julia, Catherine, Veronica, also for coordinating all this work of formation of tutors of resilience. Since time is pressing, is coming to, since there are no questions, I think there may be questions in the chat that we can send to the speakers. I think we can give the floor to Brother Diego directly. Brother Diego Munoz, a LaSalle brother who's now working with BICE. So we have the two families gathered in the person of Brother Diego for some reflections, conclusions, and some action lines to continue in our mission. Thank you, Diego. We've seen how through this meeting we were able to understand that education as a right needs the support and full participation of communities. But these are communities with clear objectives, capable of living, of experiencing these processes of resilience, that is, a capacity to reorganize ourselves in the midst of difficulties and giving positive responses. Especially the responses are to be thought through based on the knowledge of children and adolescents. We've seen in each of these reflections how the children and adolescents, the young people, have been the main characters, and thanks to them, some processes have been launched and unleashed. That's why today, in this day, as we recall human rights, we especially celebrate the right to live in peace, to develop processes of peace and justice for all. Time is coming to an end. Therefore, we want to thank you for your work, the work of the interpreters who have allowed us to follow all the dialogues. We want to thank especially Brendan Barsina, who supported us with streaming this event through the Facebook page. We want to share an invitation for the upcoming December 16th. The network of young LaSallians through the global community will launch an original Christmas song, The Miracle of Christmas. And this will be part of an experience of prayer and reflection that will be broadcasted live through Facebook and YouTube on the worldwide LaSallian networks. The song and the musical video that will be produced wants to present the different members of the LaSalle family to celebrate Christmas. So we are inviting you to join this event, this invitation from the Young LaSallians through the LaSalle Facebook and YouTube pages. And this will be on December 16th at 3 p.m. Rome time. And with this invitation, of course, the young people are the protagonists here. So with this invitation at this time of Advent, as we prepare for Christmas, we continue growing in hope, and we wish these to be times of reflection and prayer, especially to grow together and associated to this commitment with education. Thank you very much.